Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Keep your relationship fueled up with strategies discovered by couples and experts. Because at Fuel Collective, we believe better relationships will equal a better world. You are about to discover specific insights and tools that cost little or nothing to implement to help you date forever. And now, here are your hosts, a couple who always have a half-packed suitcase and a date night in the calendar, Sammy and Nathan Yeager.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast. Today we're talking all about creating a successful team and how lessons from ice hockey can translate across into relationships. We touch on the importance of accountability, communication, and understanding your role in the team. Now let's get into it.
Welcome to the Date Forever podcast, everyone. Today we've got Joey MacDougall, who is a Canadian living in Adelaide, South Australia. He's doing his post-grad law degree at the University of Adelaide. He plays ice hockey with the SA men's state team, the Adelaide Adrenaline, in the AIHL. He coached a local club ice hockey team, Adelaide Tigers, last season, and most recently coached the SA women's state team, the Adelaide Rush, in the AWIHL. Joey, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thanks very much for having me, guys.
So, Joey, how did you start out as a coach for ice hockey?
The opportunity came to me probably just over 7 years ago now through a mutual friend. He had a friend who was getting contracts for coaches in Northern Canada. So my whole role getting into it was basically going to these isolated Aboriginal communities, and we would develop hockey academies, like working with the local school and any of the kids in their hockey program, just to make sure, education is important just as much as hockey is, and trying to use the two facets to really help kids stay in school and do better, because it is a bit of an issue up there.
What an amazing program.
Yeah.
Hey, so you coached the SA State women's ice hockey team from the bottom of the ladder to the grand final in one season. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's kind of one of those perfect storm seasons where the committee behind the team really did a good job of bringing in some highly skilled imports from North America. So we had 3 players that came in to be part of the team, and we also had some local players that hadn't been playing in the league for a while that came in that brought a really good skill level. And a lot of the local talent that is here, I would say, on par, if not better, than most of the other cities in Australia. So it was really nice being able to have that group come together, and they did well. And it was just a lot based on everybody really connected. And even though, you have all these players come together with different skills and attributes, for whatever reason, the chemistry was just amazing.
Yeah, and obviously, they didn't know each other, some imports.
Exactly. And it was really amazing, from my standpoint anyway, seeing these imports come in and how quickly they gelled with all the local girls.
So how do you do that? How do you get people to, I guess, connect when they're forming a new team?
I guess the good thing was that all the local players were very open to having these girls come in. It was kind of the first time I think the team had import players come over. So they were well received in the fact that a lot of players realized, okay, these girls are coming over. They have a very big wealth of knowledge coming from the high levels that they've played in North America. We can learn, and we can use this to our advantage realistically. And it really had almost nothing to do with me. The girls came into
I'm
the
sure
locker
you're being
room.
humble.
Yeah, well, they came together and they did a really good job. We had a really good leadership team of captains and alternate captains, and they did a really good job of really integrating everybody. And it's probably, in 7 years of coaching, probably one of the most cohesive teams I've ever been a part of.
Amazing.
So I guess being a great coach is really about being a great leader. So what do you think are some of the important skills to refine to become an excellent leader?
I definitely think communication is a big one, and that was one of my main goals going into the season, because a lot of times you always hear the complaints of, well, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. I don't know my role. Why am I here, really? So one of the big things I tried to focus on was communicating to the players, okay, this is why you're here. This is what we're expecting of you. And, just to give them an overall idea and kind of manage the expectations of what we wanted. Another big thing is also I tried to lead by example as much as I can. So one of our big things this year was holding players accountable. So we do realize this isn't a paid league. Like, it's not everybody's first priority. So being able to still contribute and be a part as much as you can is really good to kind of have that accountability. And for me, being able to show up just as much as they were and being prepared and ready and showing that I wanted to be there just as much as they did, I think that was a big thing in bringing everything together as well.
Yeah, I think that's really important, something that you touched on, especially being the coach and I guess showing up with a standard of behavior that you expect from your players. Like, you can't be off behaving in one way and like not leaning all in and then expecting a level of behavior from your team.
Yeah, and it really goes back to, I just remember any of my coaches, like the coaches that were showing up and being involved, they're 100% like always prepared and ready. And then everybody else in the team kind of feeds off of that energy that you're getting from it. And it really helps propel the team forward.
Yeah, and I think that's something else that you touched on there about like everybody understanding their role, like, and why you're here and what's your contribution to the team. I think it's so much easier to show up and do your part when you understand how it fits into the bigger outcome.
Yeah. And with those roles, like we wanted to be very realistic, especially coming from, the bottom of the pile from the season before. So we didn't have any outrageous goals for anybody. Like, we didn't say, okay, well, this year, we're going to win this year. We started with, okay, last season, the issues were in the defensive end. So we need to start there and work our way up. So that was the main focus from the beginning. And then we just kept on increasing our goals as the season went on. After our first game, we won it. So, okay, well, maybe we've got a shot. Let's try and win the next 3, or out of the next 5, let's try and get 3 wins. And then it just kept progressing, and we managed to do as well as we did just by setting those not easily attainable, but realistic goals. And then it really adds to the
momentum.
The momentum of it, and really builds like the character of the team. Like, when you're able to achieve those goals, you're getting that little bit of confidence is what I was looking for.
Yeah.
So the team builds that confidence, because you can go through a whole season and not win a game, and your confidence is going to be pretty shot. So it was building that up little by little.
Yeah. But I think that is a really good point, because you can have these really big goals that just seem completely unachievable, and especially coming from somewhere where you might be a long way from
good performance.
Yeah, from good performance. And so I can't imagine that if you just went in with the mindset of, we're going to win the championship this season, that might actually seem unattainable for a lot of the players. Whereas if you're breaking it down into those real small chunks and get some of that momentum, that you can actually see the progress and see the success that you're having as well. And then it's really just breaking it down into those little bite-sized pieces and adding it all together.
Yeah, exactly. Like, the whole focus was we didn't want to overwhelm anybody. Like, we didn't want anybody to feel like they had bigger role than anybody else. Like, we were all there. Everybody does their part, and in the end, whatever happens, happens. If we do well, great. If we're struggling in areas, then that's what we'll work to improve on. But in my mind, anyways, at the beginning of the season, I was happy if we came out of the season with 5 wins. So the way that everything did come together was pretty great.
Yeah, very cool. Hey, so at Fuel Collective, we have a few different, I guess, values that we try and live and lead by. And we really believe that relationships, it's not just about, being lovers and being best friends, but it is actually about building a cohesive team, tiny team of 2. So obviously there's some really great habits or traits that show up in successful teams. What have you seen in your experience?
Definitely, probably the biggest one, communication. Just everybody being on the same page, knowing, if there's issues, then you express the issues. You do it in a constructive way that isn't going to demean the other person, but, do it in a constructive way. Another one, again, accountability. You really have to be able to own up to your mistakes when you make them. It's not a blame game. You're not pointing fingers. You have to always keep that team mentality. Like, it's not just me. It's not just you. It's like, how is this going to affect everybody? And again, the chemistry of it all. Like, it's not easy. Like, some players don't gel as well with others, and you are going to have your differences, but it's finding the attributes within each of those players and who can complement that.
Yeah, I think accountability plays such a big role in all different teams, shapes and sizes, because that ability to be like, yeah, I fucked up, like, and really own it and say it and take, the brave and courageous step to first own it and then acknowledge it and say it to another teammate. without blaming anybody else and just fronting up and being like, yep, that's my fault. I didn't hit the ball there, or I didn't hit the mark there. Do you have any advice around someone who might be, I guess, like struggling to do that?
Yeah, and you made the perfect example of it. Like it's so easy to, blame somebody else for something that you've done wrong. And the biggest thing that I always think of before I ever say anything to any of the players, if they've done something wrong, is 9 times out of 10, they know that they fucked up. Yeah. So that like they know that they've made a mistake. And personal experience for me playing, right after it happens, I don't want to be told that. I know that I've done it, and I don't need to be told. If you're going to address it to me, like it needs to be done in a way that's still constructive. So I know it isn't easy. It's very hard to, it might take a few minutes to be able to say, okay, that was my fault. I'll be better next time. So it's something that you don't always see or hear. It's sometimes when it's the end of the period or end of the quarter or whatever, doesn't matter what sport you're in, but it's usually in those intermission times that people will say something. And it does take a lot to do that. But coming from a coaching perspective, it's one of those things where you kind of try and tease it out of them, where it's like, hey, you had some good points on that shift, but do you know where you went wrong? And it's usually yeah, I do. And say, okay, well, let's try and work on that. And then that's it. It's done. It's been touched on and it's over with.
Yeah, I think there was something that you said in there that was really great around like, I'll try and be better next time, like, or I won't do that again. It's like acknowledging like, cool, I might not have the skill set to not make that same mistake yet, but I am going to acknowledge it and I guess highlight it as an area that I need to work on. And that really can be anything, right? Where it's like, oh, I know I made a mistake. I either had different expectations for how that was going to turn out for myself, or I actually just can't do the thing that I was trying to achieve. And I've really got a skills gap where I am where I am now. I'm not quite where I want to be yet, and highlighting the gap that I've got to work on. It's like, I probably won't do better next time, but I'm going to work on it.
Yeah, and it's one of those character traits in not all players, but a good few, that if they're able to ask those questions and say, okay, well, I need to do better, but I really don't know what I'm doing wrong. Like, can you help me? And another great thing with our team and that contributed to our success was that we had a lot of good players that were willing to step up and do that role. So I didn't have to a lot of the time. Again, going back to the imports that we had, played a very high level, and they were able to, coach just as well as I was. And it's one of those things where you don't always want to hear it from the coach. Sometimes it's better coming from your peers.
Yeah.
Or someone that's on the same level as you.
Yeah.
So yeah, it absolutely is. It's something that's not easy for players to do, or anybody to do, really, to really own up to that. But it's something that definitely, I think, strengthens the cohesiveness of a team or in a relationship. If you can own up to it and say, what do we do going forward to make it better?
Yeah, and stepping out of that blame game, because I think like when we step into that and it's like, oh, this is not my fault. Like, yeah, I might have not done things perfectly, but it's not all my fault. And you pushing that blame onto the other person, like that can be really abrasive and sort of start to like erode, I guess, trust.
Yeah, and it really does. And you see it in the players on the ice. Like you'll see players come off and they'll sit on the bench and it will get abrasive and slightly confrontational. And you'll see the body language of the person that's been attacked the next time they go out on the ice. Like it's almost a complete shutdown. Mm-hmm. So all of a sudden you're taking that one person out of the game, and it's like having a player advantage for the other team almost.
Yeah.
So it's really finding that fine line of how do you address it, how do you do it constructively, and how do you not do it in a way that's going to severely impact the mental health almost of the other person.
Yeah. But I think you touched on it earlier that quite often you will address those things during the break as opposed to actually while you're on the field. And I think that is a really good point, I guess, in relationships as well, is sometimes it is like you might have feedback or know that you've messed up or something, but it is actually good to kind of step back from the confrontation, I guess, and then address it at a time where you're both a bit more calm, you're both not in the heat of the moment anymore, not triggered anymore, and you can actually get to work out what the problem was and address it properly rather than while you're all fired up and in the moment.
Yeah, because I'm sure we've all been there before where, it's heat of the moment and just you say things you regret pretty quickly. it happens in all sports, and you can see it. Like any live sport you watch, you see players going after one another, and some players feed off of it, and they actually use it to their advantage. But then you get the other ones that crumble under that kind of criticism. But no, you're absolutely right. Like taking that 5 or 10 minutes to step back from the situation, really assess it, and then confront it is something that I think says a lot for people that are able to do that.
Yeah. Something that you touched on right at the beginning was that, you had a team of various people with various commitments outside of the sport and the team. And obviously they had different commitment levels to what was, I guess, a shared goal to perform well as a team. And, I guess the bigger goal to reach the grand final. How do you get players, I guess, like on the same page when their commitment levels are different?
The way that we kind of did it, and it goes back to like the point you guys made already from last season, or the season prior, I should say, being the last place team. So whenever I came in to start coaching, the first question I asked the team was, how do you guys want to do this? Do we want to have fun this season, or do we want to, make a conscious effort to try and do better than last season? And they all said, well, we want to get better. We want to do better. So at that time is when you tell them, okay, well, these are our practice times. Like we had the same practice every week, the same ice time. We had 2 training sessions every week, an hour each, one after the other, to kind of make it easier for people to get to one if they couldn't get to the other. And then games were always on the weekend, Saturdays and Sundays. So with having that schedule set up, the same thing every week, I think it makes it a little bit easier for people with all the outside commitments. But realistically, at the end of the day, you can only do so much. So our whole thing was give it 100% to try and be here every time we have a session. If you can't make it, please let us know so that we can adjust for it. And from there, it was really good. Like everybody was really keen to play. And I think especially after we started winning, everybody really bought in. And then it was like, okay, I want to be here. I want to do my best to get better. So that means, showing up and being ready.
Yeah, I think that's so, I guess, motivating when you see progress towards a goal, and all of a sudden gets so much easier to lean into performing or contributing to that goal, whether it's like, it can be anything, saving money or planning to build a house or something like that, where it's like, oh, we're not getting anywhere. No, we're not getting anywhere. We're not getting anywhere. And then all of a sudden it all sort of starts clicking into place and it starts feeling good, and you can see the progress. Like that way that you show up for the goal and the commitment, like together, can be really different when you've actually start to see some runs on the board.
Yeah, exactly. And again, we did well in the first weekend out. We won back-to-back games, which was already better than we did the season prior.
Yeah.
So and just to see, I think, the excitement in all the players, like it's even more motivation for me to want to be better in my position, like really be attentive and pay attention to all the little things so that in the long run, the big things work out.
Yeah. But I really liked what you said there about that you stepped into the season right at the beginning and framed up like, well, what is this about? What are we trying to get done here? Are we all on the same page about, the culture that we're trying to build, the progress that we're trying to build? Like, why are we here and what does success really look like? I know that, Nathan and I have a rhythm within our relationship where we've decided that prioritizing our date nights is important. So like your training schedules, like they're in the diary, they've got a time and a space and they're prioritized, and that we have a commitment to, I guess, our relationship and each other that we're going to show up for that. And it's the same for training for a game.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the best thing is that, yes, stuff comes up. Things happen that you can't change. That's life. So I think having those dates in place and that schedule, it makes it easier to work around everything else to that. But also if something comes up, if you know a day in advance, then I know a day in advance. So having that, just having that notice.
Yeah, clear priorities.
Exactly. Rather than somebody just not showing up and not knowing where they are. Even when I'm told that I'm not going to be able to make practice tonight. Okay, that's fine. Don't worry about it. At least you're showing me that you care enough to let me know that you're not going to be there so that I can adjust what I have planned for missing one person.
Yeah, because and it's just that rhythm and pulse and I guess accountability to the commitment that you've made. Like there's no team out there that can possibly win a grand final or make it to a grand final without having a predetermined rhythm, pulse, and expectation around like, well, when are we going to show up and work together on this common goal?
Yes, exactly. I agree completely. You really need that cohesiveness and everybody with the same goal in mind, because as soon as you get 4 or 5 people with something different in mind, whether it becomes more selfish for them or this is, it's not really what I want to do, then the breakdowns start to happen. And you can see it. I've coached teams that you see it happen. So it is unfortunate when it does happen. You hope that you can kind of take it out before it becomes a big issue, but nevertheless, it's something that does happen. But yeah, you're absolutely right. You really need to have that cohesiveness and everybody on the same page, driving towards the same goal.
Yeah, but I think that's why it's important, like you touched on it earlier. You started out with getting everybody on the same page, actually asking them, like getting their buy-in and asking them, what are we here to do? And it was, I guess, them answering that question and saying, this is what we want to do. You were now able to lead in a way that was getting them towards that goal too.
Yeah, and it really, it was good for me knowing that, okay, if this is what they want, then I know this is where I need to push them. Or basically in my head, the way that it comes easiest is that, okay, you want to have fun? Well, then I'm going to have a lot of fun with it. Okay, you want to be a competitive team? You're probably going to get yelled at. So that's kind of my interpretation of the whole question, is that, okay, well, you've got to be ready to take that criticism when it comes. Like, you've got to be ready to put the work in.
Because you told me that's what you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So we didn't only do that on a team level, but we also did it at the individual level. So I had, meetings with each player individually and said, this is where we see you right now. This is what we expect from you. If we're not getting it, we're going to let you know. But also, this is what you can expect from us. So I think really having that detailed information, like each player, when stuff happens, it's not a matter of, why is this happening to me? Like, why am I not playing at this point in time? Or why am I not in the game? Whatever the question may be, it's already been addressed. So at some point, there's still always questions regardless, but at least it's not what did I do wrong? What am I missing? It's okay, I obviously need to do better.
Yeah, I learned this. It was within the last couple of years, this idea, and it's going to sound so basic, but resentment comes from unmet expectations. So if someone's not getting minutes on the ice, they obviously had an expectation that they were going to get a certain, amount of game time. And because that communication of the expectation hasn't been, I guess, transparent, then it creates resentment. And it's the same in relationships. Like if I've got an expectation that Nate's going to, behave a certain way or deliver a certain standard of behavior or expectation around like an anniversary or a birthday or a special occasion, and my expectation is that he's going to put it in the diary, there's going to be a gift of some kind, gifts are my love language, and that we're going to go out for a nice dinner. And if I haven't communicated any of those expectations, I'm going to have resentment.
Yes. And it does translate to the bench as well. And it did happen. There was a few times that players did get called into play, like somebody that's not actually on the team regularly, but we needed to fill a spot. And we did have some of those players come up that I didn't do as good of a job communicating to them what would have been expected of them coming into the position. So again, you end up with that expectation of, oh, I'm here, I'm going to get to play. Where realistically, you're here, you may or may not play. You're kind of here to be, a fill-in. Like if we really need you, we'll use you. But if the game's not going our way and we're not winning by a certain amount, you're not going to get that time in. So you're absolutely right. You have to have those expectations set and knowing going into it. Otherwise, it does create that resentment. Like, why am I sitting here and why is this player getting to play? I feel that I'm better than them. And I had a very open, I'll say an open door policy where anytime the players had issues, they could come and see me. But the big thing was, and I told them from the beginning as well, is that I will be blunt with you. I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. If you come to me and say, why am I not getting this ice time? Why is this not going the way that I want it to? I'll tell you exactly why. And I think in the end, as abrasive as that may be, it created a level of respect between the players and I.
Yeah, it's that clear is kind, unclear is unkind.
Yeah, it's a great way to put it.
Yeah, I really liked what you said right at the beginning, though. It was about everybody having a really clear understanding of what their role is in the team. Like, what is it that the piece that you contribute and how that fits into the greater piece. So then it's like there was an expectation that you would deliver on this piece towards this goal, and then you haven't done that. It's much easier to have that conversation to be like, hey, you need to shape up. It was explained at the beginning what was your role is and what the expectations were, and you are not performing. It's much easier to have that latter conversation if the ones before have occurred.
Yeah, it's a lot easier. It's like all these fires start to come up if you don't have it, and it's putting them out all the time. Whereas if that, precaution is taken in the beginning, then it's much easier to deal with along the way.
Yes, you touched on this a little bit earlier, but players on the team can experience conflict, which can then affect the overall performance of the team. So do you have any insights on how to repair that conflict after it's happened?
Yeah, it's always different. It really depends on what it is. And one of the big things is it spreads very quickly. And every team that I've coached always has the one or two players that you really have to manage and be wary of, because they're the ones that are a bit more the loose cannons, and
the fiery
they're likely
ones.
Exactly. It always seems to happen at some point during a season. But it's really just when you see stuff happen, it's best not to confront it right away and kind of try and be the wedge in between the two people. I've always found it best, see it happen, let it happen and finish, and then individually afterwards deal with the problem and kind of, bring the people together and fix it that way. Because people see it on the bench, and a majority of players are good at saying okay, this shouldn't be happening right now. This is a little over the top. There's obviously an issue here. I can't let it affect my game. But already 2 players have been affected. So if anything else happens with those 2 players, then it's just back and forth. And then you really see the drop off in competitive edge. So it's really just kind of first instance, let it happen, and then work on it at the appropriate time, really.
Yeah, I think that's key too. And I mean, obviously conflict happens in relationships. It's delusional to think that it's not ever going to happen. You're a complex human being. I'm a complex human being. And we're trying to cohabitate and build our dream life and go about, achieving our big things. It's just, there's going to be conflict. But I think it's really important, like what you just said, to know how to handle each individual player. Because the way that I guess want to heal and repair after conflict might be very different than Nathan, where it's I need some time and space to process what's just happened and then let's circle back to it. Whereas there might be a player who's no, we need to deal with this now. I want to get this resolved now and on my timeline. I think understanding, what you said, whether or not you deal with it in the heat of the moment and let them have their 2 cents and say what they need to say and get it all out so that it can be, when it's done, it's proper done, not lingering.
Yeah, exactly. Even the weight can be lifted just by letting both players say their piece, and then they both get it out, and then it could be instantaneously done.
Yeah.
And then we've moved on and you go forward. If it's a lingering issue, then that's usually when the leadership team with the captains and alternate captains, they'll get involved with it. And I tried to let them deal with most of those issues just because, I touched on before, sometimes it's a lot better coming from, your peers rather than a coach. So we were very lucky. We didn't have a lot of those issues this year. Anytime we did, the few times that we did, it was dealt with in a very good manner through the leadership team.
Mm. Hey, so I don't want to end on such a, I guess, aggressive note of conflict. I want to go back to something that you were talking about in terms of breaking a goal down into smaller pieces and, starting with a team who were, like you said, on the bottom of the pile and building up that belief little bit by little bit that it was we might actually have something here. Let's finesse it. Let's work on it. So as your team sort of, I guess, got that momentum and started to build more and more belief that they, had something worth nurturing and continuing to work towards, how do you do that? How do you take that big goal and sort of start really small and how do you layer the belief, I guess is the question.
I guess, the biggest thing was identifying what the major issue was from the season before. And the common thing was always came back to defense. So what we started was with all kinds of different plays and scenarios within practice to strengthen our defensive zone area. Once we got that down, we worked on transitioning from that defensive zone area to be more of an offensive team. So moving the team up the ice. So you start with those defensive tactics, and then once that looks to be, okay, everybody's got it, then let's progress to the next step. And it's just all these steps that you progressing constantly throughout the season. But at that time, it was probably 4 or 5 weeks just on the one concept, and then moving up. Once the puck's in the other team's end and you're trying to score, like as long as the puck is in there, people are going to move around. You're going to move the puck. You're going to do whatever you think is the right thing to do to score. But when it comes to that defensive end, you need to know what you're doing. So it's really just, you break it down into those small bits. So your defensive end, the neutral zone where you transition, and then your offensive zone. So we knew that if we were going to be hard to score against, we could still put the puck in the net once or twice.
Yeah.
So it was just, once we put all that together, we went into our first game. And that was the big realization for me, was that, oh, wow, they're listening to me. Like, they're doing what we've practiced. Like, it's not just an absolute crapshoot whenever everybody gets on the ice. So seeing everything that we had implemented go into play really was very rewarding for me. But then all the players realized, okay, coach knows what he's talking about. If he tells us to do something, let's try and do that to work on it. So, and it always happens in the game. You're constantly fine-tuning things to adjust to the gameplay and what's going on. So it's even, you've got these goals in between games, like the weeks leading up to your next game. What did we do well last time? What did we not do so well? So it's always changing the goals to fit what needs to be done.
Mm.
So it's constant. It's never ending really. And it's just, yeah, you've got your goal at the top that is, we want to be in that grand final for a chance to win it. But the tree of small goals leading up to that is immense, and it's constantly changing.
Yeah. So what I guess, like, translating that into a relationship team is, like, you identified the weakness, and it was like, oh, that's probably where we've got the biggest opportunity to get in, fine tune that skill set or that gap, and level it up, and then kind of lay it on top of that. It was like, all right, well, what's the next thing that we can work on? What's the next thing that we can work on? What's the next thing that we can work on? I think everybody would be able to do a little bit of a inwards look at their relationship and be like, oh, do you know what? We really suck at managing our calendars. We really suck at managing our finances or our direct debits, or we really suck at managing our, like, the environment in our household, and we're always like, there's always stuff everywhere, or we really suck at grocery shopping and managing our fridge, and there's always moldy cucumbers or something. Like, I think everybody knows the areas where they can be like, yeah, I could definitely do some work there. So I think that what you said is really great. It's like, oh, just start with something that you can identify where there's an opportunity for growth and layer.
Yeah, and it's really building up those layers, and then you get to that new base layer, and it may be fine for a while, but then you start realizing new things that you probably never would have noticed if you hadn't fixed the first one. So yeah, just being very reflective, and it's almost nitpicky, but it's really all those small things lead to the bigger picture, I find. So you fix all those small problems, and then maybe that's when the bigger problems start to reveal themselves, and then you already have a good handle on, okay, well, how are we going to fix this?
So what would be your, like, I guess, number one top tip for starting out building a successful team?
Oh.
Communication, accountability, understanding your role, getting on the same page.
All good things. And I think really really communicating the expectations of what you expect of the team and all players, and then creating those goals and making sure that everybody knows the goals. Like, it's not just something that's said once and then it's forgotten about. It's, okay, well, this is what we said. This is me holding you accountable for it, and I'm going to continue to do that until you start to show the progression that is being expected of you. You're always going to have those withdrawals where you fall back into the bad habits, or you think you fixed something, it's going well, and then it reoccurs again. So it's not just, you don't throw in the towel after that happens. You go back. Okay, we fixed it once. Let's fix it again. Move on.
That's great advice.
Hey, Joey, thank you so much for joining us today. We have a couple of cool beliefs and values at Fuel Collective, and they're really about loving life, dating forever, and then being the change. So to be the change is really about taking accountability for what you can change in your own life, but also making the contribution to the world that you actually want to be a part of. So to say thank you for joining us today, we're going to give 10 days of tuition to some girls in Cambodia, allowing them to have access to a teacher and get that support that they need to stay in school and progress to the next grade, which has enormous flow-on effects for the rest of their life. So thank you so much for making that possible.
Well, thank you guys very much for having me and doing that. And I think it's really great what you guys are doing.
Thank you.
So if people have enjoyed what you've been talking about today or want to know a bit more about the Adelaide ice hockey scene or something like that, how should they connect with you?
Probably the easiest way is through Facebook or Instagram. I think I've given you guys my handle.
Yeah, we'll pop it in the show notes.
Yep.
Excellent. And even by email, I've got a Gmail account, and any questions or queries can be sent there. Definitely the ice hockey scene is something we're trying to develop here in Adelaide. It's had some potential over the last couple of years, and I think unfortunate with this current situation, it's kind of put a bit of a slowdown on that. But hopefully next season or with the women's season around the corner, we can start to build it again.
Yeah, awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks very much, guys.
Thanks heaps for joining us. If you love what we're doing here and want more, subscribe to the Date Forever podcast to make sure you never miss an ep. Come and hang out with us and other awesome couples who are fueling up their relationships in the Thriving Couples Collective Facebook group, or check us out at fuelcollective.com.au. Until next time, keep on dating, because better relationships equal a better world.